Okay, thank you for attending the webinar. I'm going to turn it over to Paul Parsons for the presentation of the Profit2 webinar. Paul, please take it away.
Sure. Hey, thanks a lot, Gary, and thanks a lot for everyone that's attending today. As Gary mentioned, it'll be a brief 30-minute kind of a presentation on kind of planning for more profit for 2017. I'll kick things off by giving you just a kind of a little, a brief snippet on Profit2 and kind of our background. We've been in business for over 15 years. We're a consulting firm based out of a suburb of Kansas City. Over the last 15 years, we've worked with over 250 distributors on strategic pricing and margin programs. We just work in distribution. All of our partners began their career in wholesale distribution, and we kind of feel we understand the balance that that your operations, IT and salespeople work. You kind of balance between, the fine line you walk between trying to increase margin and create the correct price impression in the marketplace. A little background kind of on what we are is we're a software as service. We're not software to purchase. We don't reside on your system. If you talk to some of our clients, they might tell you that we're hired to do a lot of the comprehensive analytical work that you might know that needs to be done, but you frankly might not have the time to do. So the program's focused really specifically on your distributorship. We do the work, you retain the control, you set the course for the project, and it's our job to kind of get there, help get there in a quicker time frame than maybe you could do on your own. It's really focused on two different key aspects of pricing, and really those are, I guess, pretty obvious if you've been in distribution for a while. One is just the scale and the challenge of having so many pricing decisions and getting granular enough to be able to optimize your pricing in the correct way can be awful challenging. There's just so much data to have to go through. So just kind of the scale of getting pricing in the system can be pretty daunting. Once that's done, then getting the sales force to trust and utilize the pricing can be a pretty big job. So it's really the kind of the IT and system challenge, and then once that's kind of completed, then we kind of turn our attention to really getting the sales force behind to utilize a program. The vast majority of our customers we work with are privately held businesses that have been around for 40, 50, 60, 70 years. So really job one on the project is to make sure that we can safely increase margin and do it in a conservative and defensive manner that doesn't upset the price impression that our partners have spent years creating. So that's a little background, and now we'll kind of dive into the kind of focus of the next half hour, which is how can you predict or what's in it for you for a margin program for 2017, if that's going to be on your kind of executive teams or your management teams key initiatives. And so a couple comments really quickly before we dive into the meat of the discussion. What we find is this is a study from Robert Morris and Associates that was conducted just over a year ago, and what we found is that there's kind of a higher quartile distributor that earns about twice as much as earnings as a percent of sales as kind of the middle quartile earners. And when you kind of dive into the data on this study, what's kind of apparent is that the main difference to be a high quality earner as a distribution company is really in how you price. It's not necessarily how you buy. The buying groups have kind of leveled the playing field on that. And really, frankly, with the way that kind of healthcare reform has taken shape, I think everyone's just paying a lot for healthcare coverage, but it's kind of levelized. And so the cost of doing businesses are fairly consistent between, depending, almost agnostic to size. And really, the key differentiator in how distributors earn more is really how they price. And so we feel like, for Profit2, there's not been a better time to work with our existing clients and future clients on programs to help them get from maybe becoming, middle of the pack earners to best in class. And we really think the focus should be really, and the main attention should be on how you price. And what's the point of margin really worth? And if you look at this as a generic example, but a 1-point margin can be well over a 40-point increase in earnings before income tax. So it's really it's the difference between a middle of the pack earner from a distribution standpoint and best in class is really only a couple points of margin. So we feel that trying to be a top earner in distribution is within reach for a lot of distributors. There's some work to be done, but there are some ways where you can kind of predict and gauge how much margin you can expect to make on a project if you decide to look at this type of initiative as something as one of your key initiatives for 2017. And so how do you predict margin in the future? How can you estimate how much what your gain is going to be on a project with a company like Profit2, or say if you run an internal project? And what we try to do is obviously use analytics and tools to help determine what that gain is. And what we found through 16 years of doing this is that there's no better indicator of how much better we can be in pricing than using your existing sales history. And so on a full project, we're using 2 years worth of history pulled out of your Infor ERP, and we're looking at that and analyzing it and determining, from an item segmentation standpoint, from a customer segmentation standpoint, what's kind of the low-hanging fruit and how should we stage a project. But before we even get that far, our clients want to know, how much do we stand to gain first year on a project, and how do we get there? So we're using your existing sales history, and we're going to look at what portion of your sales are more transactional or incidental in nature. And what we find routinely, and this is no surprise to anyone on the call, there's roughly in the neighborhood of, say, 200 to 500 SKUs that typically make up somewhere between 50 to 70% of a given distributor's sales in a year. And there's another maybe 10, 15, 20, 30,000 items that might make up 25, 30, 35% of sales, but those items sell infrequently. The amount spent on the items is lower in the hundreds versus thousands. And what we find routinely when we look at data with potential partners on projects is that their average margin compared to where they're selling their most kind of transactional items is very compressed. And there's not that much differentiation in how you price. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Unlike many industries, I'm sure we've got colleagues and friends we know in different industries, distribution has one that's got some of the most price discretion by salespeople of any other industry that exists. And so what generally happens with distribution companies is that salespeople are pretty reticent to be they resist change, and they also resist having higher margins on a lot of these more transactional items because their focus and the feedback they get from the marketplace is on the 200 or 300 or 400 items where they're getting feedback on a daily or weekly basis, and those items are the real high radar items. You're getting feedback, they're items that your customers will realize when there's been changes in price. And so what happens naturally is whenever a more transactional item's ordered, maybe once every 6 months or once a year, the idea is almost a calculator mentality. Let's add 5 points to it, call it a day, and then we've done our job. And we feel that kind of approach is it's kind of oversimplification of a process, and it's being, we all understand that no one would want to sacrifice a $10,000 or $20,000 order because you've priced a $40 item too aggressively. But what we found is that by and large, in the vast majority of cases, your clients aren't shopping that $40 item. They're buying that from you for convenience purposes. So what we do on a project is really determine what portion of your sales is incidental, what portion is transactional, what's the low-hanging fruit. And we do that kind of in a preliminary benchmark analysis before we're even retained on a project. And we're using sales history to kind of determine what's available in a project first year. And as we kind of go on this kind of pricing odyssey, and we realize that we're not going to include certain customer contracts or commoditized items or common items, and we're really focused on the items that are really the most transactional in nature. And so we in most distributors, that's somewhere between 25 to 35% of sales, depending on what segments you participate in. Step two, after we've determined how much, what percent is available, we kind of look at the within that incidental range, how much margin can we grab? And if you look at this chart, what we do, there's really two key margin sensitivity factors when you're looking at a project or a margin initiative. One is how much does a customer spend on an item over a period of time? Then how frequently do they purchase that item? So item velocity and how much they spend are really the two core components of any sort of margin initiative. And so on this chart, we've broken this example into a couple different ranges. If a customer spent under $250, say over the previous 12 months, it's in that lowest band. Conversely, if they spent over $5,000 over the previous, say, 12 months, it's in the upper band. We look at the average gross margin percentage, and what we're trying to do is determine how much differentiation does the distributor have in pricing as the pricing steps up. And just as this example goes, the average gross margin for this distributor is 25 points, and as the amount spent declines, you can see the average gross margin. This distributor's sales curve follows the old distributor rule of thumb. As the amount spent decreases, gross margin goes up, just like it should. But they're only getting a 31% gross margin, and whenever the amount spent on an item is, say, $300 over the previous data set. And so it is really 6 points of differentiation, or 31% less 25%. 31 less your average margin. Is that amount of differentiation aggressive enough for those items when they're that transactional? And we would suggest that most distributors, that whenever we look at preliminary data, only have 4, 5, 6, or 7 points of differentiation between their most kind of transactional items and whenever their average margin. And that differentiation point is just too low. Over the course of a project, we're looking to get 12 to 15 points of differentiation between your average margin and your most transactional items. And that's the kind of range that the best-in-class distributors are getting. So that's really kind of our stretch goal, and it kind of helps. It really helps shape how to determine how much we can gain, because we're really kind of looking at and carving what are the areas that are most high-profile targets for a project. And so those are some key goals to really try to increase the differentiation and pricing from, say, 5 to 7 points to upwards of 12 to 15. So to make it, to kind of use an example, if we've got 30% of sales to work with, we're trying to get about a 5 to 7 point lift on that portion of incidental sales. Then once we kind of determine what is available in a project from an item segmentation standpoint and what percentage of your sales would kind of lend itself to what we do, then the next step is to really focus on utilization. And what we find, and this has been 16 years of data in the making, we found that right about 50% of industry system pricing is lowered throughout the 30 segments of distribution that we kind of play in. And so that means that 1 out of 2 line items is being altered, and usually it's in the wrong direction. And what we find is that if you look at this chart, you notice that whenever system margin is under, say, 15%, there's only about a 10% override rate, or there's a 90% plus acceptance. But notice how as the margin in the system increases, override rates, it gets astounding to over 50% whenever you're in the 30 to 40 point margin range. And we hear from our executives that we work with at distributors all the time that their salespeople are very fearful of charging anything more than a 35 or 40 point margin on really any item they sell, because they feel like they're gouging their clients. And I guess as a part of our training, we really want to let the sales force in underneath the hood and let them know that, we live in a world of differentiation where, this morning at 7-Eleven, I paid, 3 points at the pump, at 70 points in the coffee that I purchased inside. And some of the most expensive items that our company stocks as a distributor are some of the items that are the slowest moving and some of the highest process costs are on the items that are 60, 70 bucks and ordered once every other year. And so we as a business really can't afford to sell those items at or below the average margin. And what's really astounding is when we look at a data set for, say, a year's worth of system data or 2 years' worth for a project, there are literally thousands and thousands of instances where a transactional item, an item that's sold for 50, 60, 70, 80 bucks, that might be bought every other year, is sold at or below your average margin. And it drives a lot of executives crazy when they see stuff like that. But the reason for it is it's very obvious. There's a boatload of pricing activity in an area where you're getting very little feedback from the marketplace. So you're naturally going to be more conservative in pricing those items, especially if you've got the discretion to price them in the first place. And so it becomes our job on a program to illustrate to the sales force that, hey, that you've got competitors that are already looking at or have already invested in pricing initiatives or have taken a pricing program, and they're getting optimal margins. We've got a bunch of what's very interesting is when we look at data, we find that there's quite a few transactional items that are being priced opportunistically. It's done very idiosyncratically. We show them that, hey, we want to give them pats on the back to say, hey, you're getting 50-point margins on items, 60 points, but it's not happening very consistently. So we want to add some order to the chaos. Let them know that no human could ever possibly memorize every single, pricing combination for the thousands of transactional items you sell. And so, give them the message that there's no person better to price the 200 or 300 items that are core items that are 60% of our business. But hey, we're going to provide guidance to you using analytics for the other, 30 or 35% of sales, which makes up, 15,000 items. And so that usually that message is received pretty well. And then whenever it becomes our number one goal in the project to make sure that it's done defensively. And I'll dive into that a little bit here in a second. But really making sure that no customers raise their hand as a part of the kind of first iteration of a pricing initiative, it's really core to making sure that the sales force relaxes. Because once they're on board and they're making more money and they see that nothing's changed in the marketplace other than the company's making more money and their commissions have gone up, then people start to kind of relent and start embracing the program. And that helps to drive utilization. And so it's pretty simple to calculate your opportunity. If you look at all you have to do is multiply what percentage of sales would lend itself to a project. Typically that's 25, 30, 35% of sales. What's our first year lift goal? On that percentage of sales, what's an actionable number that we can get first year? So let's say 5 points on 30% of sales. And then let's predict what our utilization rate needs to be to hit our goal. And so in this case, we'll say we're gonna shoot for an 80% utilization rate, which means that the sales force is going to use the system pricing 8 out of 10 times. So it becomes fairly simple multiplication. 30% times 5 points times 80% is a 1.2% gain on total sales first year, and that would be for a $50 million distributor, that would be a $600,000 gross profit increase first year, which is I can't tell you how many distributors who and leaders that I've talked to at distributorships who said that our assistance has helped them increase their earnings before income tax over 100%. It can be really astounding. So that's kind of how you would want to calculate your opportunity. The way that we'd recommend phasing it in and a way to increase margin would be to look at it in kind of a three-wave approach over the first year. Initially, we're going to be defensive, protect price-sensitive sales. It's really core that first 60 to 90 days that the sales force really buys in and relaxes and doesn't believe that they know that we're doing the job to protect the price-sensitive commoditized sales and making sure that there's a record in the system that reflects the areas that we need to be priced to the penny. Then we also look at working with our clients on customer segmentation. The vast majority of our clients have a very sound customer segmentation scheme in place, it's maybe not as granular as they'd like it, or they don't revisit it and maintain it like they'd like to. So we look at areas to further segment customers for additional ways to kind of grow that margin bandwidth. And then we're going to look at ways to develop incidental pricing. Really, the goal of the first 60 to 90 days is to really just attack the lowest hanging fruit, make get that margin pop off the lowest hanging fruit, and really from a functional ROI standpoint, pay back our fee is kind of a goal for a lot of our clients the first few months on a project. So after the first 60 days, the project's completely in the black. Phase 2, look to further segment items by price sensitivity. Really start, one aspect of our program is that we kind of, our clients control the gas and brakes on the project. Some clients will elect to involve their salespeople at different portions within an opportunity review. And I'll show you an example of that review here in a second. But what it allows the salespeople to do is really get to have some say in how they price items to their customer base. And we feel from a psychological standpoint, involving sales, if appropriate in your culture at your distributorship, if it's appropriate, we feel that involving sales is a really core part of getting them to buy into a project. Because if they're involved in the decision-making process and how they price certain items, then they kind of psychologically take some ownership, and that helps really build that utilization rate. Because what we're aiming for, say over a 12 to 18-month period, is getting utilization on system pricing at 90 to 95%. And 90% is a really good goal over the course of, say 18 months to 2 years on a project. But that's what we're kind of aiming for. So we want to build that system. And because once you build utilization to the 90% plus level, and you get that type of attraction, then now the management team has a lever. And you realize that now any additional price increases are going to get traction moving forward. So, the goals of phase 2 of the process are to increase margin, gain an additional half point of margin in that next up to 6-month period, and really deepen the sales force understanding and participation in the process. And phase 3, this becomes as an example, this is the actual pricing portal that we've got, and it's got things like a live commission calculator. So the salespeople are able to track their how much they're making off of their recommendations, and they get a chance to accept, modify, or decline the recommendations that we make available to them based on criteria that we've kind of mutually set with the pricing team. The review process usually takes somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, maybe 4 to 8 hours per salesperson. We don't want them to make a career out of reviewing the pricing. They've got other things to do, but we feel that the payback in involving them can be significant because it really does increase the utilization, and it will also give us clues about how their mindset going into a project. For instance, if we see someone that blanket accepts every recommendation, we know they didn't look at any, they didn't review anything. Conversely, if we see someone that's declined everything, we know that they're probably pretty obstinate. So we're trying to kind of find that middle ground of someone that's being participatory, but making the right amount of declines so we know that they care. And so that's a big part of the process too. It kind of gives us a sense of where things are going to go. And this is just, obviously it's included in the project with Profit2, but it's a nice review portal. Let's see, hold on one sec. For whatever reason, on GoToMeetings, this slide seems to kind of hang up, and I'm not sure why, so I will work on getting it fixed, but in a second, it's going to speed up and go through about 5 slides in a row. There we go. Let's go there. So on phase 3, we're really, this is kind of the back half of the project, and really, since the way that we're set up is to be it's a consulting-based relationship where our software tools are offline. But by this point, we've kind of, the relationship with our clients has kind of matured, and they're asking us for some very customized work that's very specific to their business. But as kind of a generalization, we're looking to further increase that bandwidth, how we price incidentals, maybe looking at some items that are a little bit more higher priced, but still transactional. We'll start reviewing customer-specific pricing, we'll look at really deploying a actual formal maintenance program. We find that this is really core. One of the challenges I think that a lot of distributors face is not only getting pricing credible in the system, but keeping on top of it. It's such a dynamic pricing environment we live in. We find, I've got an example of a maintenance schedule after this, but it's generic, but it kind of gives you an idea of some of the things that we help assist our clients on. We find that having a formal maintenance schedule for your pricing system really helps keep pricing credible as you kind of move throughout a project. And keeping pricing credible is obviously massive to driving that trust and utilization by your sales force. So I'll cover the maintenance schedule right after this slide. And then eventually we'll start morphing into other areas like identifying ways to stage opportunities to maybe gain some more margin around things like, say, vendor and supplier cost increases. So, based on your type of distributor, your type of distribution company, the environment you work with, the sales cycles that you have, we're able to kind of stick and move and work within the parameters of your business to identify areas where it might be an ideal time for a review, perhaps around maybe some vendor or supplier cost increases. And, the goal first year is to gain, 1.2 to maybe 2 points in total on a project, on total sales. And then we're looking anywhere from a 10 to 1 to 15 to 1 to 20 to 1 and above ROI first year. And obviously that's influenced by and large by how much is available to participate in a program from a percent of sales, but also how large the distribution company is. So as far as the maintenance program goes, this is just an example, and I know that we don't have much time today to talk about this, but and I will have my information up here in just 1 second to kind of go over the actual. If you want a copy of the presentation or anything else, or if you'd like to give me a call or talk about this offline, more than happy to provide this maintenance schedule to you or talk about it as you need to. But this is kind of a generic schedule for us, and what it does is give you kind of a skeleton of how you might help build confidence in your pricing structure through a program like this, where we're looking at certain periods for how we're going to set up records and delete unused records from a customer pricing standpoint. We're looking at how do we need to schedule our item segmentation and customer segmentation. When should we stage our vendor cost increases? When's the appropriate time to look at non-stock pricing and vendor cost allowances? And so these are some areas that we touch on in the program, and we feel that this type of maintenance schedule is really core to having for lack of a better term, having the pricing purified in your system. So it's credible, because everyone knows that if you don't keep that pricing maintained, it always drifts in the wrong direction, especially when you're looking at item and customer segmentation. So with that being said, we're kind of rounding third and heading for home. The goal in the project is to try to grab a point of margin within 6 months, and hopefully 2 points in 12 months, and really kind of know going into it that we're going to get it because we've done a lot of the heavy lifting and the analytical work to know when to stage the reviews, and knowing that we've got enough there to work with to forecast that type of gain on a project. So with that being said, I will open it up for a couple minutes of questions if anyone's got them. And actually, I've got two that have just come in, so I'll read them out to you. Number one is, okay, you mentioned a preliminary analysis where you analyze 1 to 2 years of sales. What's the process and how long does that take? Okay, so basically what we're able to do, we actually have a team of analysts that work for Profit2, and what if someone has an interest in determining what the return on investment would be first year for a project with Profit2, I've got the information that I can get you. It's an invoice file layout that would allow you to go into SX or to whatever Infor ERP you use, and to pull the certain data fields we need for an analysis. Obviously, we're fiercely protective of our clients and potential clients' data, so we'd send you a mutual non-disclosure agreement. But in about 7 days, I could turn around that information once we got it back from whoever is interested in looking at a preliminary analysis, And what it would show you would be a couple things. One, what's the 60,000-foot view on a project? What's the potential return on a program first year? Two, we'd show you specific items that we think would be key, candidates for a project, and really lets you kind of poke holes and making sure we're kind of tracking together correctly through the process. And then we'd also look at customer segmentation to see how your customers are segmented for pricing purposes and how we might get a little bit more granular in that. And also we can look at override rates to determine kind of how much work's to be done on overrides and utilization. So it's about, if I can get data, it takes me about 7 days to turn it around with one of our analysts, and then we could set up a time to kind of preview what the opportunity would look like for a project. So then thanks a lot for that question, by the way. And then secondly, okay, we currently have a pricing team in place. What would be the advantage of hiring an outside consultant? That's a great question, and we get asked that all the time. And I would say 95% of our clients currently have a pricing team in place, and our job isn't to be a threat to the pricing team at all. Frankly, I think if you talk to our current clients, our clients set the terms, they set the outline of where they want things to go. We're hired to do a lot of work where I think our teams, frankly, they just realize they need to do, but they just don't have enough time to do it. And where their focus right now has been on maintenance, not optimization. So it becomes our job to do a lot of the heavy lifting analytical work in a short period of time and give our partners a strategic, way to get a program in motion much faster than they could on their own. We don't profess to be rocket scientists or master strategists. We're here to do a lot of the heavy lifting that's very straightforward, in a straightforward fashion, that most clients could probably do on their own, but they just don't have the time to. Or if they did have the time, it would take years to do instead of months. So the return on investment on a project is pretty astounding. But it's the way it works. It's a 1-year engagement. It goes month to month after that. So there's no long-term contract, and it's a pretty straightforward fee schedule that cash flows pretty quickly. But that's kind of how the project works. And if you need any more information, or if you'd like to talk offline, my cell phone's up here, as well as my email address. It's paul@profit2.com. I don't see any further questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Gary, and I thank everyone today for the time. And please, and happy margin for 2017.
Okay, and Paul, I was going to say, if anybody has a question they want to raise their hand, now would be the time to do it as well. And we can wait another couple of seconds to see if any other questions come in. Okay, I don't see anybody raising their hand, and I don't see any further questions. So we can wrap it up.
Well, thanks again, everybody. I appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing you at the TED conference next I think February, right, Gary?
It is February, yeah. And thank you, Paul. It was a good presentation. You got a good product. So everybody have a great day. Thank you.